How's it going, everybody? I'm here to do another little tour. Today's gonna be a little different. I'm actually gonna be in Orlando, Florida. Go figure. You're probably thinking, Tom, what the hell are you doing in Orlando, Florida? Well, went home for the holidays in Tampa, took a little trip to Orlando. It's got a crazy history, so I'm gonna give you a little bit of that. Before we start, Silvio, how are you doing?
I'm great.
Yeah, you look great. You know, the sun's out, it's a nice day. Okay, guys, before we start, yeah, if you've seen a video before, check out the Patreon. If not, you know, I guess wait till the end, I don't know. And also like and subscribe, you know, why not? And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. A lot of history to cover, more than you'd think. Everyone thinks Disney World and all that, that's some of it, but there's more than that. All right, before I ramble myself in outer space, let's get started. Ready to do this, Leo?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, so I'm here in the wilderness sitting on the stump that the first settlers used to make all the decisions concerning Orlando. Whoa. No, I'm just f***ing with you. This is actually just a stump next to a condo building next to this lake. All right, so Orlando used to be in the center of Florida, and this was the wildest part of Florida. Keep in mind, Florida was the least populated state in the South all the way until the mid-1900s. Going way back, obviously, there were Native Americans who lived here, passed through here, used it as hunting grounds and things. And then settlers started coming in the mid-1800s, and part of the reason they settled here, now by the way, before the Native Americans were here, there was lots of different animals here than what we know. Obviously, you know, the gators and stuff, but there were bears, there were camels, there were saber-toothed tigers. That's crazy. That means you're going out to get your chia bowl, there were saber-toothed tigers running around, huh? How about that for a Disney character? So in the mid-1800s, you had people start settling here, and one of the reasons was because of the Second Seminole Indian War. That's what it was called. You may know the Seminole War. There were three of them, Seminole Wars. The first one was where Andrew Jackson kind of made a name for himself. You guys know who he is. He was the President of the United States. I think he was the 7th President of the United States, known famously for slaughtering Native Americans. Holy Lord. He's also the guy on the $20 bill, the $20 bill guy, which was also his nickname at the Gentleman's Club. Huh? He was famous in the first Seminole Indian War. In the second one, one of the things they did was they gave land to people who would agree to live near forts. And there were forts here in Maitland. There was one in Christmas, Florida. That was the name. There was one in Fort Brooke, which is now Tampa. That's actually how Tampa started. So this is one of the ways that they got people to settle. They said, hey, we'll give you land. You just live near the fort and agree to help defend the place from any Native American attacks. And also keep in mind the Seminoles, that's the name of the actual tribe and actually the name of a football team here, the Florida State Seminoles, which is, you know, the clock's ticking on that name. We'll see when they switch that out. But they were actually they resisted. The reason they were being fought was because they resisted basically the Removal Act that was trying to get all the Native Americans out of the land in the east and to settle in Oklahoma, and they were like, no, we're not going anywhere. So that was one of the reasons why they got fought against. Also, keep in mind that that was also when the first settler here in Orlando made his home. His name was John Worthington. He started the Worthington Hotel. He had his own little. I mean, you know, that was the hotel. I think was like six rooms or something. It was tiny. Now there's like over 100,000 rooms in Orlando. So remember, it only became a state in 1845, so it's pretty late as well, Florida. And this all continued until about the Civil War. The Civil War started in the 1860s, 1861. Florida decides to secede from the Union and join the Confederate States. It also, even though it was the smallest state, population-wise in the Confederacy, it actually sent the highest proportion of its people to fight for the Confederacy. So good for them, I guess. That's not exactly the best cause to fight for, but you know, they did send a lot of people. And it was during that conflict, actually, that this area also solidified its role as a cattle provider. That was one of the first big industries of this area, was cattle. So Jacob Summerlin was actually the cattle king of Florida, and he was invited down here from Bartow to set up shop so he could bring some order to the area. He was the biggest cattle producer in the state, and he brought a little bit of order to the kind of lawlessness. And it was actually one of his family members, or kin, Bob Summerlin, who gave this area here, Lake Eola, its name. It's actually named after his fiancée, Eola, who actually died 2 weeks before they were supposed to be married from typhoid. That's right, typhoid was something that you got back then. It's hard to imagine, but as lawless as the actual Wild West was, this was just as lawless. I mean, sheriffs were being murdered. You know, people were fighting over land that was being encroached on by other people's cattle, and it was just a huge free-for-all. But that was the main kind of staple industry. in the area. Hard to imagine that this was the Wild West. I guess some things change. I guess people still got a lot of guns around here. So I guess that makes it kind of like the Wild West, but it's not the same cattle-driven industry that it used to be. So Florida, I guess, kind of like the good, the bad, and the sunburnt guys in cargo shorts. And all of this kind of led to Orlando itself being incorporated in 1875. But Orlando was a wilderness for a very long time, all the way until the 1800s, the late 1800s, when the railroads came. And we'll talk about that as we move. Let's go. Michael Jackson. All right, anyways, I wanted to mention how there have always been people passing through Orlando. Even though it's been a tiny little town, even early on, there was lots of people coming through, and one of those groups was the English. That's right, the bloody English were coming here because they were actually advertising Orlando as a place where they could come get lots of land and start citrus farms, which is something that was happening in the 1880s, which is when they came. Now, they didn't last very long, actually. A lot of them went back in 1894, starting in 1894, when the Great Freeze happened. Whoa! Temperatures reached to the 20s. Whoa! In Florida, if it dips below 30, it's a national emergency. People start hoarding bottled water and building bunkers in their backyard. But it actually ruined the citrus crop, which is why a lot of people left. But in that short time, they accomplished a lot. In fact, this building here behind me is the Rogers Building. It was started as kind of a center for all the English to kind of hang out. They were known as remittancemen. They sent money back to England, but they also did things like start polo clubs. They started a polo club, which is something that someone who hates the English would guess that the English were going to do when they came here. Like, look at these dirty English coming here. They're probably going to do some polo, eat fish and chips. But that's actually what they did. And they actually used this as the headquarters for the Orlando Sentinel, which was actually started by an Englishman eventually. Still the big paper here in Orlando. And you had them buying up land in other parts of the city and creating little subdivisions. For example, Windermere was started by a guy named Reverend Joseph Hill Scott, who bought 150 acres on Lake Butler, and it was his son's idea to name it Windermere after the place in England. How cute. It's now a very fancy place, as well as Isleworth next to it, which was started by two guys, Joshua and Sidney Chase, who bought up land and created also another nice little subdivision. Now keep in mind, these are the places where people like, Shaq, Dwight Howard, Joey Fatone, Bye, 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 bye. I really want to make it up. I just want to tell you that I had enough. It's pretty good. But also famously where Tiger Woods, where he crashed his car into a fire hydrant, escaping his wife who was chasing him out of the house at the golf club because he was cheating on her. Come on, you dog. Little lesson to be learned there, guys. If you're going to cheat on your wife, don't keep a ton of golf clubs in the house. What's wrong with you? But those were started by Englishmen. Pretty interesting. You had lots of contributions in the short, 15, 20 years that they were really kind of being pumped into Orlando. But they weren't the last group to come here, and we'll talk about that later. But this is actually the oldest building in Orlando as well. The Rogers Building. Pretty cool here in downtown. All right. What do you think, sir? Should we bloody leave this? It's a cheeky little stop we made. Sorry, should we go?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so I kind of alluded to it a little bit, but citrus eventually became king here. So I talked about how some of the English started their little citrus things, but once the actual railroad took off in the 1880s, it gave the citrus a way of getting out. But also after that Great Freeze in 1894, you had the land being very cheap, so people were able to buy up a lot of it. And that's exactly what this man, Dr. Philip Phillips, did. That's right, as if having two first names as your name wasn't enough, he went ahead and gave himself the name doctor because he wasn't actually a doctor. There was no record of him in the NIH. They claimed he went to Columbia, but there was no record of him there. He just kind of gave himself the name doctor and no one really challenged him on it. It's kind of weird, which is a lesson for all you kids considering med school. Have you ever just thought about calling yourself a doctor? If you're cool enough and you make good enough orange juice, no one will question you on it. So that's exactly what this guy did. So he was the largest citrus grower in Florida. He actually revolutionized flash pasteurization, which was a way to basically pasteurize without taking away its taste. He also revolutionized the promotion of its health benefits. The vitamin C, you've heard all of that. That was kind of him. He pushed that. He got the AMA, the Medical Association, to basically release an endorsement for its health benefits. Even though, you can drink too much orange juice, as I learned growing up. I mean, it's packed with sugar, that's for sure. And, you get a headache and get fat and diabetes. But aside from that, great vitamin C. So after this freeze, in the early 1900s is when all this stuff started to pick up. Now this house was built in 1893, but by 1900 it started to kind of have these bigger kind of groves. 1910, Orange County was producing more than any other county in the state. By 1920, they were producing 1/4 of all the oranges in the state, and by 1950, we're producing 40% here in Orange County. So it just to kind of give you an idea of how much this took off. In the mid-1900s, citrus would be replaced by another industry, tourism, which I'll talk about. So by the 1990s, it was only producing about 6%. It all, it was boom and bust, but all that because of all that land that was available after that kind of freeze. But yeah, this is actually Dr. Phillips's house. Dr. Philip Phillips. Phil. Philip squared. Pretty cool. You can, I guess, get married here if you want. You can come, do like your quinceañera. I don't know if you guys are in the market for that. But you could also just come and stand in front of it and film something weirdly while they look at you through the window. Make sure you're not some creep. Little do they know, I am a creep. All right, let's go. Okay, another thing to keep in mind about Orlando is you have Orlando, the city, but then you have the suburbs, outside the metropolitan area, which also influence the city and vice versa. So right now I'm in Winter Park, which owes its existence to Loring Chase, who came here in the early 1880s on vacation. He was actually trying to get better from his bout with bronchitis. He came to this area and he was convinced to look at the land. He was a wealthy guy. So he's like, all right, so he bought 600 acres here for almost nothing, and he started a town. And it's a tale as old as time. You go on vacation and you end up buying a whole town. And that's what he did. And this is Winter Park now. So this is in the early 1880s. It ends up getting incorporated as its own place. Just so you know, a little not for nothing, but Florida is actually only the second state that has the least amount of natives that live in the state. The one with the least amount of natives is Nevada, actually, believe it or not. But then comes Florida. So everyone here is transient, is what I'm saying. Another thing that helped places like Winter Park grow in this time, the early 1880s, was the railroads. Now the railroads were what was starting to be put up in Florida around this time and help things grow. So here, for example, right nearby is a town called Sanford. And there was a man named Hamilton Diston who bought 4 million acres of land in Florida at the time. To give you an idea, 4 million acres is it's bigger than the state of Connecticut. It's pretty crazy. I mean, I'm sure Connecticut has 30 times the amount of Range Rovers, but it's still bigger. And this area, because of Hamilton Diston, started to get kind of connected by the railroads. There was actually a Sanford to Jacksonville line, eventually a Sanford to Tampa line, etc. So because we're close to Sanford, little towns like Winter Park started popping up. It also connected the eventual citrus industry. You also have here in 1917, believe it or not, this is where they supposedly they discovered the Temple orange. It may not sound like anything to you, but if you know the sweet little oranges, that's where they say they invented them here. They discovered them here and named the Temple orange after W.C. Temple, who was the head of the Growers Association at the time. The Temple orange is considered kind of the snacking orange. You may recognize it from when people got it in their lunch boxes as kids. I don't know about you, but every time I got an orange in my lunchbox, I was pretty pissed off. Give me those sweet Dunkaroos, baby. Come on. I don't care if I get diabetes. Anyways, pretty cool. Winter Park. There are obviously other little towns and neighborhoods that are outside of city proper Orlando, but are still very important and impacted the development of the city proper as well. And we're going to talk about those as well as we go. All right. So what do you think about that?
Let's do it.
Let's keep moving, baby. All right, so there were a few factors for growth that caused Central Florida to grow. We talked a little bit about the railroads. Henry Flagler was the man in charge of the railroad on the east coast of Florida. He brought you all the way down to Miami, helped settle South Florida. Then you had Henry Plant help settle Tampa. He was responsible for today's University of Tampa, the original, that beautiful hotel there. I talked about that in my Tampa video. You watch that one, huh? There you go. But you also had roads. I'm actually sitting here right near I-4, which is a road that takes you from Tampa to Orlando. You had the Sunshine State Parkway open in the 1950s. That was basically the turnpike. You have also roads bringing you down through Florida that pass through Orlando, making it very well centered. In fact, all the way from 1925, you had the Dixie Highway that was opened, shortly after cars were invented. Yeah, it was called the Dixie Highway. It's only the second most racist name for a highway, behind Germany's Final Solution Parkway. So this brought people initially called tin can tourists starting in like the 1930s. These were people who basically came with, the saying was they came with one shirt and 20 bucks and they changed neither. They would basically, yeah, that's basically, I guess that makes me a tin can tourist when I come visit. Huh? But these people would basically just kind of park their cars and, just hang out in the nice weather, and those were the first kind of iteration of tourists. Starting in the early 1900s, the first quarter of the 1900s is when you started having real estate become a thing. People were flipping properties, selling them to people up north. There was a group of people who would basically put a down payment on a piece of land and sell it before another payment was even due. They called these people binder boys, which is also the name of the least respected 90s rap crew. This caused the population to basically double from the year 1920 to 1930, from around 19,000 to almost 50,000 in just 10 years, and it would continue to grow. You also had this area boom because of World War II. In fact, it was a huge training center, and bases were built here as well because of the weather, because of the year-round weather, because of the ability to house troops here, train them here. They built an Air Force base, the McCoy Air Force Base, which actually after World War II split time as being also the international airport here. So it was an Air Force base, and it had like one runway for commercial flights and one runway for the Air Force. It's actually McCoy. MCO is actually Orlando's abbreviation on the airport, and it's because of McCoy. It used to be the McCoy Air Force Base. Ah, look at that, you're learning stuff. That's for all you, airport abbrev aficionados. Also, the last thing that helped this area boom was the space program. That's right, 1950, Cape Canaveral is chosen as the site for the space program. NASA is created in 1958, and that's basically the site where the space race is kind of like centered. Remember, Kennedy made that kind of promise that they would make to the moon before the end of the decade, and he got, spoiler alert, he got killed. But we did make it to the moon, and all of that was kind of happening here in Cape Canaveral. They had tried to rename it Cape Kennedy, but the people there were like, yeah, we don't want that. Give it back to Cape Canaveral. But that also brought other things here. In fact, the Glenn Martin Company made its home here. That was really loud. The Glenn Martin Company made its home here. You may know it today as Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin is a huge, missiles and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I hope they don't drop napalm on me right now for talking about them, but they have offices here, thousands of employees, starting also in the 1956, I believe they opened here, thousands of acres, etc. So this leads also to the development of a college that could provide the brains for these things. UCF started as Florida Tech. Florida Tech was a place where they were going to train people to be engineers and all these things for these companies. Look at that. And not for nothing, Tupperware also put its headquarters here. Tupperware, Earl Tupper, started this little thing with these airtight little things for storing food. Little known fact, the first space shuttle was made out of the same materials as Tupperware. That's not true. I made that up. Anyways, let's keep moving, because there's another thing that caused this area to boom even more coming right up, and the transportation was a big part of it. All right, here we go, guys. So I'm in Disney World, huh? As you can tell by that sign, pretty cool. Okay, look, I didn't actually get into Disney. I did go in, I shot some, I'll show you some B-roll, but we had problems with the sound. We were getting in trouble because, you're not really allowed to film. But I'm gonna show you some stuff. Either way, I'm gonna talk about it because this is the most important thing to happen to Florida. One of them, definitely the most important thing to happen to Orlando. Now, let's get to Disney. 1955, Walt Disney opens Disneyland in Anaheim, California, 160 acres, becomes a huge deal. But he notices that only 2% of his visitors come from east of the Mississippi. So he's got to get that money, baby. So he decides to open a Walt Disney World. Now, believe it or not, in 1963, he was ready to sign the papers to open Walt Disney World in St. Louis, Missouri. He goes, they go out for dinner the night before, and this man named Gussie Bush makes the comment at dinner saying that anyone who's going to open a theme park without selling alcohol needs to have their head checked. Everyone laughs. Walt Disney just sits there stewing. That night he goes back to his hotel, says, we're done here, not doing it. They start over. And then he starts looking at other places, and he goes to Orlando, Florida. He saw a place that had tons and tons of roads connecting and converging on Orlando. So he starts the process of buying up over 27,000 acres. He forms 9 shell companies, hires Wild Bill Donovan, who was the head of the OSS during World War II, which was the predecessor to the CIA. Wild. That's how much they were into secrecy. And that means that the crazy guy yelling on the corner how Disney's in bed with the CIA, he's not technically wrong. But it was important because here's a way to kind of show you how important it was. 1964, to get 1,500 acres would have cost you $168,000 in that area. Fast forward to 1966, after Disney was announced, would have cost you $2 million. Now, his plan was to open a place called Epcot, the experimental prototype city of tomorrow. It was going to be this residential even area with 20,000 residents. It was going to have all kinds of cool exhibits and rides and all these things, right? Problem was, he dies in 1966 before anything is open. So Roy, his brother, takes over. Now, using this kind of idea of Epcot, of a town, of a city, they are actually able to push Florida to give them the Reedy Creek Improvement District, which is pretty much a municipality. They had the right to zoning, they have the right to fire department, they have the right to basically create a nuclear power plant if they want, which is insane. Now keep in mind, this is 27,000 acres. This is the size, double the size of Manhattan. Another place very famous for its rats. Okay. Another thing that happened was Disney was taken over and headed by a man named Michael Eisner starting in the 1980s. And he took it over for a long time and expanded it. He went into hotels, he went into other parks, he went into other countries and blew up the Disney name. Now, he did this all using those same Reedy Creek powers that were intended to service a town that never came about. So it gave them the upper hand on all of the other parks trying to compete with them. Pretty nuts. It's hard to overestimate the effect of Disney. To give you an idea though, in 1960 there was about 3.5 million tourists around that central Florida area. In 2022 that number had skyrocketed to over 70 million people. That is a crazy amount of people. That's almost double the size of California coming into Florida every year. So that's the power of the mouse. You don't mess with the mouse in Florida, although recent news is that Ron DeSantis, the current governor, is going head to head with Disney because Disney came out publicly against his law saying you can't talk about sexuality in classrooms. So he took their Reedy Creek powers away, but before it went into effect, his law, they had transferred all the powers that they wanted to keep from Reedy Creek to their company and left the ones they didn't want with Reedy Creek when it dissolved and was replaced by his board of cronies. Pretty wild. This is all playing out in the courts right now, but it's kind of a circus. But what more can you expect from good old Florida? But that's kind of the basics of Disney. I did it like this because I'm planning on doing a video on Disney, specifically for the park and all that stuff in the future. So stay tuned, baby. Subscribe, all right? But we're going to keep this video moving because there's still more to talk about. Let's go. All right, and Orlando's still growing. Obviously, there's jobs to be had. You know, tourism industry isn't going anywhere. But some of the people who are coming here aren't from Florida, aren't from, mainland United States. I'm actually here at what's called the World Food Trucks. This place is amazing. It's just food trucks from all over, mostly Latin America, which is pretty cool, including Puerto Rican. A lot of Puerto Rican people have moved to Orlando in recent years. In fact, it only held about 2% of the Puerto Ricans in the United States in the 1990s, but then by 2010 held almost 20%. There's over 300,000 Puerto Ricans in Central Florida here, over 300,000, making it second in concentration only to New York City. So just so you know, Puerto Ricans are considered citizens of the United States, in case you didn't know that, in case you live under a rock, but you're here to learn. I'm not going to make fun of you. The Jones Act was passed in 1917 after Puerto Rico was acquired from Spain in the Spanish-American War in 1898. In the mid-1900s, they made it not a commonwealth, but similar to a commonwealth. Still pretty much a colony of the United States, where the U.S. has kind of rubber stamp authority over everything that's kind of passed there, and Puerto Rico doesn't have an actual vote in Congress in the United States either. So it's a whole thing, but they do have the ability to come here at will if they like, and so many people have taken advantage of that in recent years here in Orlando. Pretty cool. Lucky for us, because we're gonna get to eat mofongo now. Yay! Anywho, they've come here looking for jobs. In fact, starting in the 1970s, certain kind of home builders and things were advertising in Puerto Rico to bring people here. And there are lots of tourism jobs. Disney, etc., also markets jobs to Puerto Ricans. Go figure. In fact, they have a nickname for the Puerto Ricans here. They call them Mickey Ricans. That's true. I didn't make that up. That's not a slur. That'd be a weird slur to call, someone after a, mouse cartoon. I don't know, you start making fun of them, threaten to drop an anvil on their head, I don't know. But it's actually what they call them, Puerto Ricans, the Puerto Ricans here. And then you have all kinds of Latin Americans as well. So you have cool places like this, man. You come eat freaking cachapas and arepas, ahí, mofongo, all this stuff's amazing. Also, after Hurricane Maria, in fact, there in recent articles, a writer recently said that what Miami is to Cubans, Orlando will soon be to Puerto Ricans. To kind of give you an idea, they're really kind of just making this their headquarters in Florida. If you want to know more about the status of Puerto Rico, I actually did a video where I interviewed Yarimar Bonilla, who's an expert on Puerto Rico in New York, so you should check that video out. Hey, yeah. And not for nothing, but I also did a tour of San Juan. You watch that as well, so watch that stuff, man. There's other videos to watch. Anyway, sorry, but they are coming here, and it's pretty awesome. It kind of makes the town and city more diverse. If you like that kind of thing, and if you don't, you're a racist. Get over it. Anyways, all right. This place is amazing. I'm starving. I'm sitting here, smelling all this food. I gotta be done. So let's go wrap this thing up so I can get some food. What do you think? So you ready to eat some food?
Oh yeah.
What are you gonna eat?
Everything.
That's a very diplomatic answer. All right. Yeah. Just pondering the beautiful view that I was looking at the intro. Anyways, guys, we learned a lot. Look at that. We learned that this used to be cattle country. We learned that it turned to citrus country. We learned that it turned to tourism country. We learned about Disney. We learned about, well, I mean, what didn't we learn about? We learned about every possible topic there is to learn about on the planet. And guys, if you enjoyed it, I mean, like and subscribe, check out the Patreon. There's some extras on there. That's how I fund these things, baby. It's important. That's how these things grow, Lord knows I ain't getting any ad revenue from the Florida citrus growers anytime soon. But yeah, I don't know. So what'd you think, man? Did you learn something?
Big time.
Big time. Learn big time. That's what the kids say these days. They learn big time. All right, well, I don't know. That's pretty much it, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching this far. Good Lord, what a journey we went on. Ain't no 60-second clip here. Huh? 20-some minutes you watched. Good for you. Congratulations. You sat still. All right, now I'm rambling. See y'all later. I don't know what this was, but